So exponential technologies. Am I moving in and out of the camera? Am I okay?
You're good where you are.
Okay, cool. So everybody's seen this. I'm going to pick on these as we go. I'm not going to pick on any one particular. Pay attention to blockchain. Please pay attention to blockchain. I'm going to have a list of books in the back that if anybody wants exponential organizations, this is probably the best one. I just interviewed him on my podcast last week. He's fantastic. That will significantly impact the health industry, and I'll get into more specific about that in a moment. So, know who's disrupting.
It's somebody putting us on hold.
Now I know who's disrupting.
I was doing a webinar one time, and we had a bunch of credit unions on the phone, and they put us on hold, and we started listening to all the mortgage rates going on, all the new mortgage rates. So so we're going to end. So I start out with exponentials. Middle was enterprise IT security, and we're going to end with offense. And so studying your top disruptors in the field. How many of you are in charge of understanding disruptors to your areas right now? Yes, some of you, all of you. Okay, I think you should, and I think it's fun to, and I'm going to show you how. And one of the things is, I don't know where you all play. I love the neuroscience part of this. There's the medicine fits in different areas here. I just had a deep learning, machine learning salon last week with some of the best people here. Incredible what's coming out that's real and tangible today. What's interesting is that this is a machine intelligence. They're not calling it deep learning or machine learning. Machine intelligence landscape. You can't read it, but you easily find it online. These are the agents, enterprise platforms, industries, and I can sit there and go, where is healthcare? List of all the companies that are playing in there. Who's disrupting the industry and really studying those, and why are they on this machine intelligence landscape? This is a very disruptive, so the Excel program disrupted, added gasoline to the fire for selling PCs. I still remember to this day, my father went and bought Lotus 123 for his construction company, and it's form of Excel, right? And so it transformed computers. Machine learning is going to do that for our next generation of computing. So what's happening in healthcare? Those are the industries that are transforming the industries of healthcare. Cultured leather. We're actually growing protein right now. Sorry, we're growing meat. We're growing tissues. We're going to be growing lungs pretty soon. We're 3D with digital printing. So what's the disruptor? I don't know what it is for you necessarily, but I know when I look at the conferences, the exponential conferences, personalized medicine, personalized data, IoT, and feeding IoT into back-end databases. Public data sets that you're marrying to them personal information. So starting to really understand is we have the answer to almost everything. The hardest part is finding the right question. When I think big data, I think retroactive crowdsourcing. So this is by Atul Butte. And so some of the speakers, you can research them, and they're talking right now about digital health and body computing and coaching, exponential data to insight. So we talked about Debbie today. I'm not sure exactly her presentation, but I think we don't want data, we want wisdom, or we want insight. And we want it presented in a way that human beings can make sense of it. But machines are going to win. Machines will win the crunch battle. We don't have the ability to compete, but we do have the ability to have wisdom. There's a long way to go before the machines reach that point. So scaling innovation. We're looking at ecosystems, multi-platform ecosystems, public domain information that's being turned up. I talked to, I'm not sure if it's public information, so I won't share it, but it's a health association down the street who's patched in to some data sets at NIH. They're already adding new revenue lines because they're making this data, they're pulling it out, they're making it usable to their membership, and he's really good at adding revenue lines to his business. I wish I could say his name. Everybody here knows him, but I just don't know if he wants me to know it. He's taking data sets and he's making really strong use of them using some of the strategies that I'll be building upon here. So enabling the disabled, the future of brain-computer interfaces. The guy last week talked about a disabled gentleman that he had built a machine learning algorithm. Like literally the interface between this device and a printer there's an interface. There's a interface that makes this machine talk to the printer. He created an interface between this disabled gentleman's head and his ability to move the arm. He just thought, I'm going to move the arm. It translated that into mechanics of moving the arm. It was the first time this guy had moved his arm and touched his fiance in, I think it was 6 years. So that's, many of us are not involved in that industry, but that's the power of what's happening and things that I'm exposed to that I want to expose people to so that you're aware. This is about individualized medicine, which many of you are aware, the microbiome. So I don't know necessarily where this probably is not going to affect anybody here, but understanding the microbiome is important because Moore's law is growing at 1.5. Medicine's actually at 4x. So it's growing so much faster, and so this is a really important area could be an important area to pay attention to. The future of the brain and neuromedicine, massive. Global health tracking, the future of clinical trials, digital trials. So this is all from a document that's on the Exponential Medicine just last week. How many of you are experimenting with VR right now? So VR is, I went to, I was at Shola's place and I went by one of his guys that I've known for years, and he had a VR backpack that he's testing. Why? Because it's going to impact training and learning. It's a massively, how many have tested one before? Yeah, it's amazing.
Somebody at work is developing something, so he brought in his,
okay.
the thing that you put on, and it's great. He's trying to convince our meetings department to actually create one. So instead of going to our annual meeting, they could actually be there using this device. And of course, everybody at the building's like, are you crazy? But I can see where that could be used in the future.
I literally was on a roller coaster with one, and I stumbled. It was that immersive. It was so training, testing. All of this is going to recontextualize. So many of you are into ongoing education and additional ongoing learning, conferences, things like that. I think we need to stand up a lab, not for $50,000, $5,000. Test it and start figuring out ways. And why is Shola doing it? Because I had lunch with him. He goes, I didn't really think about VR. That's awesome. Because I never even think about it from that angle. So now he went out and tested it, bought a VR backpack, and starting to bring these ideas to fore. So crowdsourcing. There is the ability, in another slide, so crowdsourcing is one of the strategies. Like the smartest people don't work for you, they don't work for me. The smartest people are around us. How do we patch that talent pool for not spending, again, $100,000, we spend $1,000, $2,000, get the expertise we need to help bring these tests quickly to market. We can also measure our readiness. Some of you might be stuck in such a legacy organization that there's just no way they're going to have to be disrupted to move. And but some organizations are actually very proactive. You can measure it, just like I measured IT security. We can actually measure on the back of one of the books. There's a series of questions to ask. You can actually measure the readiness of the organization to move and innovate. So essentially, what it comes down to is software is eating the world, and so anything that's inefficient is going to be put into software. And one of the big things that digital leaders need to be paying attention to is APIs and algorithms, is really getting good at understanding how the APIs that you can get access to and pull data into to make sense of. And so that's a strategy. Now, Debbie talks about what to do with the data when you have it. But I think the CIOs, and I know this, how many of you are in charge of this right now in your organization? Okay, perfect. So I don't see that going away, and I think it's even become more and more relevant. And micro experiments. So this is an interesting piece, is that micro experiments is the ability to fail often and fail fast and fail small. And it's to gain critical acceptance of projects and doing at the edge of the organization. So some way, from hook or crook, or maybe because you figured out a way to do IT security cheaper, free up dollars, put it into offense. And playing offense is actually having these skunk work projects at the edge. And this is how they're counseling big companies now to do it, because there's a very large legacy organizations that are really in trouble, and they're having to innovate with their IP, taking an IP, uncover it, and then really get it into motion and test them, and whether that the market will bear the prices that they want, and whether they even want what they want, what they're going to sell. And so the concept is fail fast and forward. It's design thinking, and it's design thinking is the concept of lean. And it's a lean entrepreneurship within the organization. It's not entrepreneurship, it's intrapreneurship. And push projects to the edge. What that means is that we give a project a fixed budget, and then we don't feed it an endless cycle. We find people within the organization that are of a similar mindset, a similar ilk. They're the ones that want to test, and they want to test new things, and they want to bring concepts to market. And there's a reason why we don't do that. Is because we don't want to disrupt the core business because of corporate antibodies. And corporate antibodies are people who are resistant to change. And so when you bring new ideas to people that are resistant to change, it just kills the idea. So that's why we really want to get good at testing these concepts at the edge of the organization prior to reintroduction into the organization. And that's called innovation at the edge. So design thinking and lean startup. I have some books in here that you all can read about that. But it's Eric Ries is one of them. Also Lisa Solomon. So there's different ways in which people are testing this out. And one way to find people who have entrepreneurial tendencies is to go to HR and find out those people who are going to be fired in the next 2 months that are on performance plans, performance improvement plans. Probably 50% of them need to go. 50% of them are just bored silly. If they're bored silly and they're smart, you take them in and they're in charge of the skunk works, or at least they're part of the team with the skunk works. Find the people that are. You need the people in there that have the energy and the will to test. And there's methods of doing that where you bring models you build the model and then you show people. You don't build a fully functional system. You build the model with a couple pieces of functions, then you show it to people. Ask them what they like. Get rapid iterative feedback. Get failure information very fast. Make it okay to fail. Not like security where it's not, we're not okay failing. This we want to be okay with that. We want to start to have a culture and a team that accepts that. Staffing to build expertise. So many of us don't have the staff. So does anybody here use Upwork or Odesk or any of these tools where you can tap into talent really fast and kind of buy it on an hourly contractual basis? Okay, so that's a great way. So using tools like Upwork, Mechanical Turk, and Odesk, you can patch. I've done this with tons of efforts. For example, I have my podcast produced in Czech Republic. I've had design work done in Uzbekistan. I've had, usually it's not in the core of my business that I'm doing this. It's never in the core, actually. It's always at the edge where I don't have the talent. It would take me too long to scale the talent. You can tap data scientists through Kaggle. You can get into data scientists. You can get into quant people. So you can rent this talent, putting your projects together, and have these skunkworks projects. And this is how you keep the costs down and staffing for expertise. How many of you have used community or crowds to get feedback on ideas, on landing pages, yeah? Have you done that successfully? Cool.
We're doing it for CME data across states. I mean, it's kind of basic, but just pushing that out as far as CME data for hospitals and states and other organizations. So it's not, it's information that would be extensive for us to get. We're just asking them to provide it. Great. So there's Kickstarter and there's Indiegogo for literally looking at how can we fund some of these campaigns that maybe cost a little more. We've gotten through a POC stage with them, and we want to now go to market to build. And so looking at how communities and crowds are influencing, because the smartest people don't work for us. If you just remember that, how do we access some of the offensive capability that we want to tap into? And one of the associations I'm working with is like, well, why they're actively looking at why are they just in the US? Like, why are we not across the world? Like, why are we not tapping into serving members in India? Why are we serving members and I'm curious, I don't know why that's stopped, because right now we have the ability, you have the unique advantage of having community already. You have this large communities. Exponential is completely all about communities. I mean, Linux is all about it's all about community. It's built a huge groundswell. You all have like micro Linuxes in every one of your member establishments. But one of these bigger thinking, it's very difficult to think big. It's really difficult to transform in thinking. And so when we're exposed to these concepts, it makes us think in a different way. And so, and I'm going to get into this a little more, but one of the pieces is how do we think
in an exponential way. Like, how do we think? It's very easy to think linearly. A plus B plus C, and I'm going to get to Z. But exponentially is about bigger steps in transformation. So this is the challenge. Many of you have one of the big concepts of offense is massive transformational purpose. How many of you have within your department a really big vision? A big vision for the department. And it flows upstream a big vision for the organization. So a big chunk of this is attracting the right talent, building the right communities, actually having a big vision that really gets people excited about what you're building, the skunkworks projects you're doing, the rebranding efforts you're doing, whatever you may be doing to transform within your organization. I'm talking a lot about offense, but sometimes you might need to iterate and innovate internally. And it's about rebranding. It's more about rebranding and reinvigorating than it is about buying a bunch of new equipment. So transformation can happen internally and externally. And I've mentioned this already before, but identifying the corporate antibodies is big. And so many times we leave these conversations and we're like, it's very exciting. We share it with someone and boom, it's just the rug's taken up. Find the people you can have coffee with in the organization with and share these ideas about putting a team together that's a skunkworks team at the edge. We're testing concepts. Find someone that actually is safe to share it with, that won't be a naysayer. Get buy-in, and then slowly build buy-in with the people that you need the funding with. Usually it's not the CFO. I've been told, and I would agree, that the CFO would probably be the last person to go to for gaining, because they're about protecting and that's their job. They want to protect revenue within the core, and so they're not necessarily going to free up cash. So paying attention to what you disbelieve. Absolutely, when I mentioned blockchain, do you cringe? When I mention any of these things we mentioned, do you internally cringe? Just pay attention to that. I'm not saying it's wrong, but pay attention to it, because moving forward, the guys that are, and ladies that can play really good offense, they lean into the stuff that they're poo-pooing. Like, for example, I have Snapchat right now. And the reason I did it is I wanted to test. My kids weren't responding well with email. Maybe some other people share that, 15, 13, and 10. And texting was pretty good. They were able to respond with texting. But man, when I got on Snapchat, I'm like the Snapchat king right now. And why did I do it? Because Facebook is ageifying. They just offered, what they do is that now they have 50-year-olds that are taking selfies that said they never would. And they know they don't have the attention of the 10, 11, 12, and 20-year-olds. So now they're going to buy Snapchat. They tried to. Snapchat just put a $4 billion IPO this past week. So it's going to be expensive. But Instagram was bought that same way. They were a 500-day-old company. They wanted the attention. So they bought them because they're ageifying. So just pay attention to those trends in your industries that you say, there's no way, but then all of a sudden will surprise. And that's a really important with offense. Here's some of the books that I have in my library. Really, really strong. Lean Startup, Exponential Organizations. This is huge. This Kevin Kelly, really interesting thought leader for years and years and years. He was the editor of Wired magazine. I just had him on my podcast. Really super interesting guy. So these are just different books that I think really will help you. This is really good with building crowds, and how to build like the tools that you actually would use. Joy Inc., I just had him on my podcast. He's a technical guy, not technical guy. He has one of Fortune's fastest growing companies. It's a 20-year-old company, actually 16-year-old company based out of Michigan. I love it because it's not Silicon Valley. We talked about how he innovated at the company he worked for and at the company he now owns, how he transformed the company he worked for, and we spent half the time on that, and then we spent half the time as an owner-operator, as a CEO. And what he does with his staff and his people is completely mind-blowing, completely. I handed it to my CTO, he read it in a weekend. So, but it'll show you concepts with software of what they're doing for lean design teams and how they're executing on building rapid prototypes, avatar analysis and such to really develop software for some of the biggest brands in the world. If you all are here locally, we're going to have 2 design shops this month and in January. If you live locally and want to attend, we're going to be hosting it at MAGA Design. So some takeaways in summary. So learn to play offense. Join an innovation group like mine or someone else's. Being around people that think the same way keeps the brain stimulated. It's just a challenge. I go to Silicon Valley, I come back, I have to stay in the pocket with this, or I get blown out with linear, because we're so surrounded with linear and fright and fight. And so it's really to think big and to be in this space. You've got to be in a group or just have some close-knit group. Be surrounded by ideas and people who think similar. So I've heard it said, and I believe this, that we're the average of the 5 people we hang around. So if we're getting advice from our peer CEOs who aren't innovative, then it's going to be difficult for us to move to the next level with this and to play at a different realm. So we're the average of the 5 people we hang around in different contexts. So just be aware of that. Build systems at the edge, avoid corporate antibodies, pay attention to lean design thinking, forget big data, think little data, and understand who your disruptors are. Pay attention to blockchain. How many, I'm just throwing up here, I don't know if people fall into that category, but I sometimes hear that some of the legacy organizations are so used to the CIO not playing in the revenue game that it just, like they need permission, but also it's cultural. There's a big cultural impact here, and I understand that, but I believe that transformation starts first internally, and that the culture will never give you permission. I think that permission has to come first inside, and then hopefully you're in a culture that allows it. Otherwise, might have to go. But in a mindset, neuroscience. So I like to pay attention to the neuroscience of this a lot. I think the brain impact is pretty huge as far as how we make decisions, and whether we're in fight or flight with our teams, how we manage as a person individually. This is not easy stuff. And I mentioned, I'm not going to pay attention to IoT and dashboards, but all the stuff that we have won at through the years, dashboards, APIs, algorithms, they all feed visualizing data. I want to stress the importance of that. Defensive takeaways, play defense hard, don't play ping pong. When we're into buying and trading technologies and completely get out of who's winning with technology, I really in swinging for the fence with different technology purchases. They're important, but it's more important to have a complete landscape before we spend. And settle into strategy and risk, which will drive all tactical execution. I'm such a big proponent. Trust me, I make tons of money selling products, but I never lead with it, ever. Embrace IT security complexity with strategy. Eliminate overlapping technology confusion, data governance, privacy, and risk, and understanding context. If there's anything that you can get to, and it's hard, but it's much easier now with tools, is find out the data that's at rest. It'll drive all your decisions from that point forward. I'm not saying you have to do anything about it, but run a scan. Run the scan. Again, it's better to know that you have a hole in the bottom of the backstop and just decide that it's okay, and I don't want to touch that right now, than to not know it exists. I like creating defensible arguments and plans. Create something that you can argue against. And I know nobody here has auditors that come in, but I'm big on having the data that we can go to battle with. And so if we have context across the whole spectrum, no matter what auditor shows up, we can actually win the battle. Be patient. I have rarely seen this done in one budget swing, but I've seen it done over two years, which sometimes is a couple different budget swings. So how do you contact me? You can, I told you at the end that I was going to tell you who I was, and then instead of at the beginning, I founded RedZone in 2001. We're an enterprise IT security company. We do integration and managed services. I have a podcast you can find on iTunes and on Stitcher that I interview thought leaders, CIOs, digital transformation leaders. I cover a variety of different topics, but really interesting, and love to get your feedback on it if you listen to it. I've also created the scoreboard as well. It's a company that at RedZone we use a ton. We've already talked a lot about that. I also run a group called the CIO Innovation Insider. This is a newsletter that you can get access to weekly. If you're interested, I can send you, or Patrick can send you a link to it. And we have a CIO innovation group that meets monthly, just to really keep these things alive, these topics alive. It's, as I mentioned, the brain thinking exponentially is it's like lifting weights. The more often you lift, it does get stronger and more elastic. It is a little bit more challenging to do it up front. So it's a group that we meet to talk about these things. And then I'm the chapter ambassador for Singularity University, which is a lot of the themes that I'm talking about today from an exponential point of view are coming from Singularity, and I just run the local chapter, and it's we collaborate everybody together, all themes, everybody. There's no, and it's just really to understand what the impact areas are in all these different technology areas and the governance and the ethics around them. So that's the end of my presentation.